the most famous perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to road.
Hello and welcome to Classic Rock Facts. This is where we celebrate our shared music history from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Check out our extensive video library. I know there is something you'll like. Here are just a few. Would the Beatles have reunited at Live Aid in 1985? The MC5, the world's most dangerous band. Journey's Steve Perry, genius or recluse? The Who, the Riverfront Coliseum tragedy, what really happened? The television special you are about to see is called John Lennon Remembered. It was broadcast in the United States on December 9, 1985, exactly 5 years after John's untimely death. The cast is impressive, and it also marked the first time many of them had made public comments on the topic of John's life. Hosted by Wolfman Jack, this special immediately transports me back to that time. I instantly remember when I heard the news. I was a young man, driving to work in my red Buick Skylark. Tuning in the radio, I wondered why every station on the air was playing Beatles music at 6 a.m. Then suddenly a song ended and the DJ said, "John Lennon dead at age 40. I sobbed as I drove the 30 minutes to my job. This documentary opens painful wounds that have healed over in the past 46 years. However, its historical importance cannot be understated. The window into 1985 is critical to appreciate the depth of one man's life and death. Here is John Lennon, remembered from December 9, 1985.
The main feeling for me is it's not sort of pain or anything, it's just numbness, you know. You still can't really believe it, in truth.
I think that in general people have a sentimental admiration for him. They were certainly shocked at the manner of his death, and I think most people would like to see him commemorated. Most people want to think well of John.
He was a tough nut with the soft centre.
He was a difficult person because he was moody, and you could never be quite sure what mood you would find him in. I would find him early in the morning, as it were, so I know his early morning moods and his late night moods. It depended upon what he was taking, you see.
Everything was very black and white for John. And sometimes, I mean, he would make mistakes and he would change his mind, but at the time he believed in anything, he would believe in it wholeheartedly.
I mean, he had that ability to be gentle and soft and was lovely, but he was, you know, he was acid too. I mean, he gave that hard edge to the Beatles.
I just didn't want to see, I could see vividly in my mind what was happening by reading the papers, and I didn't want to get into the gory details. I was just in total shock at that point.
I was beginning to understand him a lot more, and the father-son relationship was building better than it ever had before.
Didn't understand a thing, but we could always sing. What about the night we cried? Because there wasn't any reason left to keep it all inside. Never understood a word, but you were always there with a smile. And if I say I really loved you.
You know, it's been some time now since John Lennon's life ended near his home in the Dakota Apartments in New York City. December 8th, 1980 was a day that marked the end of an era and all hope of reuniting the Beatles, the band that John had forged into the hottest act in rock and roll history. It was permanently laid to rest. The Beatles legend will live forever, and because of that, the myth of the cute choir boy mop tops is still being sold to the public. But if my old buddy John were here today, he'd be the first to tell you that the Beatles were no saints. The Beatles had traveled a long, crazy road from Liverpool nightclubs to worldwide success. And John's powerful imagination and personality led them along every step of the way. Yeah, for if anybody was really truly born to rock it, it was outspoken young John Lennon. And to the public, he'll always be remembered as one of the most colorful, charismatic figures ever. But to those near and dear to him, like his son Julian, other Beatles, his record producer, or even his school headmaster, he was something quite different. And that's why, better than anyone else, they know answers to questions like, what was John Lennon really like? And what was it like growing up and going to school in rock's early days? And what was it like to be a Beatle? So for the next hour, you and I are going to be sharing something very special, an intimate portrait of one of rock's greatest heroes, told in the recollections of folks who knew and really loved him. And oh, special thanks to this program's interviewer, Mr. John Torb, who scoured the globe collecting these remembrances of John Lennon. Former Beatle Paul McCartney now remembers John Lennon.
Is it still painful to talk about John?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little while since. The main feeling for me is it's not sort of pain or anything, it's just numbness, you know. You still can't really believe it, in truth. Yeah. Still sort of feel like he's sort of there somewhere. It was just such a crazy thing, you know. I think I felt like everyone felt, really, just, oh, God, you know, it's that kind of irrational thing that you can't almost think anything about. You go between total anger and really sort of just wanting to, I don't know, you know, but just to have some violent reaction to thinking, well, what can you do about all that? You know, I think it's very much our modern society kind of. I think there's a lot of that happening.
When did you find out John had died?
Just early in the morning. But I sat down one day, was just strumming along, and that was the sort of idea that occurred to me, was like that if John was here today, and I was saying, oh, yes, I knew him well, he was a terrific guy and stuff, he'd be saying, oh, you know, a load of rubbish. It was in his character, so that's sort of what the song's about. It says, and if I said I really knew you well, what would your answer be? Well, knowing you probably laugh and say that we were worlds apart, and so on and so on, this kind of thing. And then it says, if you were here today, and it's about that.
Do you think there's a difference between music that is around now and music that was around then?
I hope so.
In the 50s.
Yeah.
But a difference in that, like there seemed to be a rawness about, you know, a simplicity and a rawness then that doesn't sort of exist today. And there seems to be a little melody in new wave music.
Yeah.
And yet in the 50s there was great melodies still associated with that.
Yeah, but you know, the thing is then people were saying there's no melodies in this rock and roll. Every record sounds the same, which is what they're now saying about reggae. You know, every record sounds the same. Or they say about new wave, everything sounds the same. But I think to the fans of it, they don't sound the same. Like to us rock and roll fans, you could have never persuaded me Chuck Berry was anything like Bill Haley or Little Richard. But, you know, analysts tend to sort of group it all together and sort of say, so I think it's pretty good music today. I think the big difference probably is just the technological thing. That when they were making those records, it was just, it was a straight performance. They didn't do much in overdubs. Well, nowadays, I mean, you can record, like, what, 92 tracks if you want.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference to actually the sound in the end.
Of course, it
becomes very much more kind of precise.
It was largely the Beatles that pioneered that multi-dubbing to rock technique. Sgt. Pepper's is commonly regarded as a breakthrough album.
He said notes. Dropping his notes. As bad as Michael Parkinson. Yeah, I suppose we did. We got it off somebody else, of course. Like all our great innovative stuff. People would say, wow, the haircuts, you know, and all that. We always used to say, well, we were only just part of it. We ended up being the spokesman for it and probably the most visible ones out front there, so people thought, well, it's all us doing it. But actually, there were millions of art students at the time who had their hair like that. And in the double tracking stuff and the multi-track stuff, I think originally we got that off It's My Party by Leslie Gore. That was one of the first double-tracked records I ever heard. And we just went to our engineers and said, you know that record, we'd like to sound like that. And we started with that. And of course, went over the top, as usual.
How did you and John write songs? Did you actually write songs separately or together, or was it a combination of both?
It was a combination of both. Sometimes, when we first started off writing, when we were kids, we used to just sit down with two guitars, like this, and strum sort of at each other, and sing anything. And if an idea came out, just develop it up into a song. If he had a line that I didn't like, or I had a line he didn't like, we'd just tell each other, say, I don't like that, so we'd just do that. That was one way we used to do it. That's the kind of joint compositions way. And then sometimes, like with something like yesterday, I just had the tune and the words, and I would just have that whole song, and I'd bring it to him and kind of say, you know, how's this? And I played it to them in the studio, to the group, and they said, well, you don't need an awful lot on that. You know, I said, well, okay. Yeah. And then sometimes it'd be like Strawberry Fields, and the sort of ones that were more John's, like Help would be John's idea. Hard Day's Night was his idea originally. And sometimes he'd just write them. In other words, the answer is there wasn't any formula. We did them every which way.
An orphan, John was raised by his loving aunt. Growing up a confused, sad, angry young man during his school years, John's teachers thought he would never amount to a hill of beans, all except one, Headmaster Pobjoy. Mr. Pobjoy remembers John Lennon.
What were your impressions of him? Can you recall those for us?
He was very talented. He's made his name, of course, in pop music, but he wrote poetry, he designed posters, he painted, he was very keen on salmon fishing, had many interests, and he was good at many things.
What was his scholastic record like?
He narrowly failed in every subject he took in external examinations, but that was merely because he attached no importance to passing. I think it rankled with him a little in later years from one or two things he said, but he's certainly a very intelligent boy who could have passed with ease if he'd wanted to.
There's no suggestion from what I see around the school here that it's a working class school, and yet John seemed to have working class values.
I would have said that is a myth, that John had a lower middle class upbringing, if you must put a label on John. I think it's been convenient for some people to describe him as working class, but no, I don't think so. There are many working class children here, but we have the normal distribution in the state school, that is to say a school where fees aren't paid.
And you were responsible for getting John into our school, as he suggested.
Well, I discussed with John and with his aunt what he should do, and I had a word with the principal of the art college, who didn't later on thank me for it, and he did go to art college, and that's what he was referring to in his letter.
But you saw something in him that...
Oh, he had great talent. It didn't take any great perceptiveness to realize that.
Is there any resentment about the Beatles in Liverpool?
Some party politicians reproach him for having left Liverpool and not having returned.
And that's...
And they oppose the raising of a fund to build a statue or the naming of streets after him.
Would you say it's a widely held attitude?
Not widely, no.
What would you think Liverpool's attitude was about it?
I think that in general people have a sentimental admiration for him. They were certainly shocked at the manner of his death. And I think most people would like to see him commemorated. Most people want to think well of John. John has told the truth about his life in his writings. He's given an unvarnished account. I don't think people want to hear him criticized. I think they would want to be proud of him.
I love you.
Alan Williams, a local huckster and promoter, jumped into the Liverpool music scene by taking notice of brash young John Lennon. William arranged an audition with Lennon's band, Johnny and the Moondogs, for a tour of England. Instead, the band was booked for a tour of Scotland, during which they almost starved to death. But nevertheless, thanks to Alan Williams, their first agent, later known as the man who gave the Beatles away, they were on the road. Alan Williams remembers John Lennon.
Alan Williams, you have the distinction of being the man who gave the Beatles away. Alan, could you tell us how that came about?
Well, it looks like I'm stuck with it till the grave. My son said to me, just going off the track for a minute, Dad, he's 16, he said, I hope I'm not going to be known as the son of the man who gave the Beatles away. That's how worried the family are about this tag of mine.
John Lennon started the Beatles.
Oh, yes, yeah, there's no doubt about it. Paul was a very late member of the group, even in the Quarry days. We've reached the stage of me calling these boys who used to play truant coffee bar layabouts, because they would sit all day on one cup of coffee. And I was having trouble with the public health authorities because of the obscene graffiti in the ladies' toilets. Because also where groups will go, there'll always be groupies, girls who follow the groups. And they used to write obscene comments about certain parts of the body of the groups in the toilets. Now, I shared my toilets in the daytime with the local shop next door to me, which was a news agent, which had middle-aged ladies serving, and they complained about the state of the toilets. So I was issued with an ultimatum: either I close the club or, you know, clean up my toilets. So knowing that these lads, two of them were from the arts college, I thought, well, if they can paint art, they must be able to paint, you know, with a brush. So I asked them would they care to paint the ladies' toilets, and of which they said yes. How much? John, of course. How much? So I paid them £10, and they redecorated. That was the first contact I made with them. And by the way, they made a marvellous job of the toilets. It so confused the Public Health Authority that he wanted to close me for the psychedelic sort of paintings that they did on the wall.
Was Liverpool a tough area at that time?
Oh, yes, yeah. It was, it's always been known for its violence. And...
Give me an example of violence. What do you mean by violence?
Well, everywhere they played, it would finish up in a fight. In actual fact, one place that I sent him to play over the water, even in 1960, there was a lad beaten up and booted to death at the very dance that they were playing in Heswell.
Were the Beatles
I used to send them to one place over the water where they used to have to hide behind the piano because the popular thing was to throw the chairs at the group. And at one stage, I sent them over to a Grosvenor ballroom where their drummer had left them, and they had to play without a drummer. Paul used to fancy himself on drums a bit, but John made the mistake of going on stage and said, "Is there a drummer in the house?"
Alan, the early days of the Beatles in Hamburg are the source of many stories about them. For example, it's reported that the Beatles swore, fought, burped, and passed wind on stage. Is this true?
Well, that's putting it mildly. I can remember the time when one drunken crowd tried to get on stage, and John Lennon was eating on stage, and he threw his knife at him. And then, not deterring the fellow, he just promptly kicked him in the face to boot him off the stage. Stories like this were rife because, you see, they were on pills at the time then because they used to work, you know, pep pills, because the hours that they used to work, they used to start something like 8 o'clock in the evening on a Saturday and finish at 3 o'clock. Now, at that period was the gun running between the Algerian War, the French-Algerian War, and Hamburg was the main port. And also, the Eastern Wall had gone up, you know, the famous Berlin Wall, which drove all the gangsters into Hamburg from East Germany. And so you had this town full of gangsters who used to love the Beatles and used to send them crates of ale on stage, and they'd be legless, absolutely legless on stage. It reached the stage at one period that they were that bad on stage. Lennon, he hated the Germans, he used to call them Krauts, cursed them, used to do Sieg Heil and anti-Hitler's words and all this to them, that they actually brought the curtain down on them and sacked them. And this was the time, I'd finished with them at this stage, it was at the Star Club. And Brian Epstein had to go over and get them reinstated. But there were very, very wild times in Hamburg.
Cavern disc jockey Bob Willer introduced John to Brian Epstein, who soon became the Beatles' manager. Epstein was anxious to handle the hot new group, but their meeting was a disappointment, with Lennon and Willer arriving 3 hours late, roaring drunk. George arrived even later, and Paul didn't even show, deciding to take a bath instead. This wouldn't be Willer's last experience with often moody, irresponsible John Lennon. Bob Willer remembers John Lennon.
Bob, how did you get on with Brian Epstein?
Fine, he was a very nice fellow.
What did he have to do with the Cavern?
Oh, nothing. It wasn't his. He just went down one day to see this group that he'd heard about, and he used to pop in quite frequently. His record store is just down the road here.
Was it at the Cavern he first saw the Beatles?
Yes.
And was it Lennon that he was taken with?
Well, I don't know, really. I wasn't there alongside of him. I do know this, that he came, he saw, and he was conquered, either by them collectively, their sound, or whatever.
Did he mention to you about what his feelings were for the Beatles? Did he ask you about them, or...?
Well, of course, he asked me what I thought of them, and I told him in no uncertain terms that I felt that they were absolutely brilliant, and all they needed was management.
Do you think it was Brian's handling of the group that was responsible for their success, or do you think they would have done it regardless of who the manager was?
No, they needed somebody like Brian Epstein who would put up with their whims, their problems, and the problems they created themselves. They were not easy. Well, they were not easy to get on with at times because they would come late to performances, and you know, that took some indulging.
What about Pete Best?
Yes.
What happened to Pete?
Well, they booted him out. There was a disagreement in the group about him.
But what was the disagreement over?
I think it was a personality clash. There is one Lennon incident. I know you're interested in Lennon more than the other Beatles. This indicates his style of sense of humor. I'm in the band room with him, with the Beatles, you see, playing records, and one of the Beatles amp humpers, they used to carry the gear in, came into the band room, and I said, oh, look who's here, it's Bernie, the original thalidomide kid, which was a very unkind thing. He wasn't in any way thalidomide. But John Lennon just fell about because, you see, that appealed to him, that very offbeat, bizarre sense of humor which he had. And I thought, well, now I've got a little insight into what makes you tick, because that's his style of humor. It's sick in a way, you know, because he used to do a spastic act on stage. Did you know that?
But was it John that you had a disagreement with?
Yeah, it was a totally unprovoked attack, and he really let fly. So I know what being on the receiving end of, you know, our peace-loving John Lennon.
Was he physically violent?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So you've forgiven him for it, or?
Oh, it was one of those episodes that you expect from volatile people. He was a hard knock with a soft centre, really. But most of the time, he would portray his hardness, you see. Because, for one thing, it was fashionable to appear mean. You know, the meanness that was coming across from rock and roll. Which is part of the rock and roll image, and he certainly lived up to it.
What was the stage act of particularly Lennon like at the Cabin?
Oh, he commanded the stage. Do you remember him, the way he stood? His legs would be wide apart. That was one of his trademarks, and of course it was regarded as being very sexual. And the girls at the front, they would be kind of looking up his legs, keeping a watch on the crotch, as it were. And that was a very aggressive stance that he adopted.
Could you say that John Lennon was the force behind the Beatles?
Well, it's not easy to say that. He complimented McCartney, and in turn, Harrison and the drummer complimented each other. I always felt that of all the groups that had formed during the 60s, that the Beatles was, in a way, perfect casting, because they were contrasting, and yet they complemented each other. But to say that without Lennon, you wouldn't have had the Beatles, well, of course, that would be true, but at the same time, that would go for McCartney, Harrison, and I suppose Ringo.
The road led to Hamburg, Germany, where the Silver Beatles, as they were called, began a 5-month trial in sleazy bars and strip joints, playing 8 hours a night. Thrown out of Germany for visa violations, they laid around Liverpool without contacting each other for about a month. And when they did, they were startled to find themselves a changed group, polished, confident, and commercially valuable. Soon they were playing to wildly enthusiastic crowds in Liverpool. Hey, coming up, George Harrison remembers John Lennon.
He's really good. He's got a lot of good tunes. He's only just started to try and do lyrics. But he, apart from him physically looking like John a bit, with his glasses and long hair, he really isn't anything like John. Much as gentle, a softer person. John was, like, very tough. I mean, he had that ability to be gentle and soft and was lovely, but he was, you know, he was acid, too. I mean, he gave that hard edge to the Beatles. You know, a sort of an orphan, as Popeye would say. He was an orphan, you know. Well, I mean, he didn't, his father left home, and, you know, like you've heard the songs, Mother, you left me, but I didn't leave you. You know, much harder, tougher person. Julian is, you know, gentle and So I don't think there's any comparison, and it's unfortunate that, you know, that Julian is allowing himself to be, you know, interviewed or put in the newspapers and all that. I mean, it started, I was 17 when I first we went to Hamburg and we were given a job in the Reeperbahn, which is the naughtiest part of Hamburg. And they booked us for 8 hours a night, and then the club we were in had to close down. The police shut it down, so they moved us into another club where there was another band also booked for 8 hours. So instead of giving us 4 hours each, we started at 2 in the afternoon, did an hour, and they did an hour, and we did an hour, and we went right through. Second week of doing that, around about the 6th set, when we were flagging a bit, and the boss of the club, who was a bit of a gangster, brought all his gangster pals in, saying, you know, wanted us to jump up and down. Preludin, which were women's slimming pills. And we'd take them and froth at the mouth and leap up and down, singing, "What I say?" And then they invented marijuana, and somebody gave it to us, and we smoked it. And the best thing about that was that we used to drink whiskey. And the moment marijuana came, we just knocked the whiskey in the head. But, you know, it's just like anything. It was not bad. I never, ever wanted to know about heroin. I just kept away from it, and a lot of my friends died, and they're still dying, you know. But I think, well, I was a bit lucky. I felt I had a tilt mechanism. You know, I could get a bit loaded, but then I'd always cut out, okay, that's enough, and go and get straight. And after a while, you know, it sort of gets boring. Plug into the divine energy and to raise your state of consciousness and tune in to the subtler states of consciousness, and all those things like walking on the water and dematerializing your body at will are just sort of things that happen along the way. So it's hard to actually explain it, but it was just a feeling of just the consciousness traveling. I don't know where to. It wasn't up, down, left or right. But it was just no body there, but at the same time, you don't feel as though you're missing anything. You know, the consciousness is complete.
On a hunch they had something special, record producer George Martin signed the Beatles to their first recording contract. Martin's collaboration with John and his musical expertise brought the Beatles' sound to the world. George Martin remembers John Lennon.
What was Brian's contribution to the group? Brian's contribution was immense, I think. Of course, we tend to forget about him now, but he did have his problems. But I think that what he actually did in the early stages of the Beatles was done. Nobody else could have done it better. You know, he really did organize that band. He persisted with them. He was turned down time and time again. And when he came to me, it really was the last throw. There's no doubt about it. He'd been to every record company in the country.
A person who seems to have paid a sort of a price for an association with John Lennon was Cynthia. Why didn't that relationship work out?
Well, they got married very young. In fact, they got married. Today, that wouldn't happen. They wouldn't have got married in today's environment. And Sin had Julian pretty early on. And I think that because of that, it was doomed, possibly. They were great friends. They were great art students together. Well, she didn't share his great curiosity of life. You know, John wanted to push away more frontiers than he had ever dreamed of. And Sin was really very happy to be fairly much at home and looking after the children. And John wasn't ready for that yet. So they were two very nice people who just didn't make it.
Yoko's presence in the band, Paul McCartney just a few days ago told us that he initially didn't like Yoko. What would have been the reasons for that?
Well, I guess it was an irritation that they were having to deal with someone that was outside the Beatles. It was as simple as that. That when John hitched up with Yoko, he said, Yoko is now part of me. In other words, as I have a right and left hand, so I have Yoko. That's me. And wherever I am, she is. And that was a bit difficult to deal with. I mean, it was an irritation for me. Suddenly she would appear in the control room. Nobody was handing to me. I wasn't even introduced to her, but she would just sit there. And her influence would be felt. And so consequently, to begin with, everyone was irritated by it. Even when she was ill, her bed was brought into the studio so that she could be present while they were recording, which was rather bizarre.
Was John an imaginative person to work with?
Yes, always. Always also incredibly inquisitive and curious, and always wanting to find out new things. And I mean, he was always pushing me to go a bit more adventurous, push the barriers out a bit further.
John acknowledged a period of drug taking during the Beatles' lives. During this period, were you sensitive to the fact that you're working with people who are in an altered state of consciousness almost?
Well, the period we're talking about was really the kind of flower power period, wasn't it? I really wasn't aware of their taking drugs much before that. I was aware of them smoking pot. And even during the Sgt. Pepper bit, I wasn't too sure about what they were doing. Didn't really want to know because I didn't approve of it. And they were rather like school kids. They used to keep it away from me. You know, if they wanted to go and have a drag of smoke, they wouldn't do it in the studio. They would nip into the canteen and lock the door and have, like naughty boys in the lavatory, you know. They would go away and hide away from the schoolmaster.
Do you think that the creative floodgates would have opened even if John hadn't used drugs?
Difficult question. I think possibly he was able to release his inhibitions a bit more. I mean, drink loosens tongues, and I guess drugs do too, although I've never taken them and don't approve it. But I've seen what drugs have done to so many people and destroyed them. I don't believe that it makes anyone more talented than they are. I think that John still had that in him anyway. And I think his ability to handle words the way he did. I think that John was the kind of Salvador Dali of music. You know, he had such a gracious imagination. It was tremendous. But he was able to put it down in words and music.
Despite his feelings about the group, Martin thought they needed to replace the solemn-faced drummer Pete Best. Thus, Ringo Starr became part of this illustrious group that ultimately made them all millionaires. Coming up, Julian remembers his father. May Pang, an attractive record company secretary, first met John in 1970. May worked on a movie crew with John and Yoko, but she had no idea the part she would later play in John's life. May Pang remembers John Lennon.
How long did you spend with John?
About a year and a half that I've spent living with him. And, you know, and I worked for him before that, and I continued to do some work with him a short time after that.
Do you have any recollection of impressions of John at that time? Your first impression?
I think my first impression is I was amazed to see him. I couldn't believe he was just standing there. He was a bit scruffy at the time when I saw him. It was during the 1969 period, and where he was just with a beard, and he had his overalls on. So he was a bit scruffy.
What sort of a person was John? Like, was he an outgoing person, or did he keep to himself a lot?
He enjoyed being with people. He liked going out, having a good time. He loved going to movies. He enjoyed music. We went out to see, you know, various groups, you know. But he would do it on the spur of the moment. It wasn't the type of thing that he had planned for.
What were the differences in the contribution that John Lennon and Paul McCartney made to the writing of the songs?
I think that in John and Paul's cases, that Paul was the melodic, the melody man, you know, and John was a lyric writer, and his lyrics were a little heavier. Because if you listen to their songs, definitely when people listen to it, they say, "Oh, I love that song. Did you hear the lyrics?" And you could tell that it's John. John always had that. He was so quick and witty. He could just write. I didn't want to confront him if we had arguments, because he had he just know how to outdo you. I just stayed away from it. He was good at that, and Paul's a very good melody writer.
There's also a story about John Lennon and Harry Nilsson in Los Angeles at the Troubadour. Are you aware of that story?
Yes, I'm very aware of it. I'm very aware of it.
Were you there, were you?
Yes. During that time, it was just the Smothers Brothers opening, and it just happened that there was a lot of, everybody was just drinking a bit. And Harry has this tendency to egg people on to keep going, and John was one of those people that, you say it, I'll do it, you know, and he just went on.
Was this the famous where John came out of the ladies' bathroom?
No, no.
It wasn't that?
No, no. They're two separate incidents.
What was that incident then?
The other incident just happened that it came out, and he had a couple of drinks, and he saw
You can say
the Kotex, and he just put it on his head, and he forgot about it. He literally forgot about it, and we just went off, and he was drunk. We went to Troubadour, and we went with some friends, and it wasn't you know, a lively time. You know, it was just decided to leave, and then we just left after that.
This may be a little painful for you, but could you tell me when you first found out that John had been murdered?
And I happened to be on the Upper West Side also at that time, and I was at a friend's house, and a DJ came over the radio and said something about, and he was almost joking. He said, "Oh, we're trying to find out about this rumor has it that somebody had been shot, and it might have been John Lennon." And I'd been sitting there with the radio on, and nothing had been said up until that moment, and I just started to get crazy. I was just like sitting there going, what are they saying? And my girlfriend said, calm down. I said, I don't know what's going on. John Lennon had died a few minutes ago. And I just remember just opening up the door and screaming down the stairs saying, he's dead. And I became into, it didn't sink in for almost a day. It was just, my phones did not stop ringing when I got to the house. It just kept ringing. And I just couldn't believe it. It took almost another day to really sink in, and my friends were trying to get me to relax, and I couldn't. It was really hard. I just couldn't even move.
Born at the height of Beatlemania, Julian Lennon was almost orphaned from John by his father's fame. Separated for a 10-year period, he then began to develop a close relationship with John. And just as it got started, 5 shots ended it. Julian remembers his father.
Of the Beatles music, what music did you like out of that period?
Well, I suppose the earlier stuff, really, when they were together, the earlier, in 64, 65.
Songs like what?
Oh dear, I can't remember. Yesterday.
Had you met Yoko at that stage?
Yeah, I'd met her. 67, I met Yoko.
Yeah. How did you get on with her then?
Well, I didn't really know her, you know. It's just sort of, yeah, it was just sort of first opinion. Oh, she's a friend of Dad's, you know. That was it, really.
And what about the last time that you saw her? How did you get on with her then?
Very well, really well. I mean, she was completely heartbroken, and I was sort of trying to cheer her up in the best way I could, and it was very difficult.
Yeah. How much time did you actually spend with your dad?
Well, it was generally in the later years. Late 70s is when I saw him the most. It sort of started from a 5-year gap to a 3-year gap, and then just the last time I saw him was 2 years ago in March, and it was just then that he sort of said to me, well, now's the time, you can come any time you want, rather than me saying, well, I'm busy now, or I'll see you, you know, in a few months' time. It was up to me then.
Yeah. Was there a kind of a developing relationship between the two of you then, was there?
Yeah, it was getting much better, you know. I was beginning to understand him a lot more, and the father-son relationship was building better than it ever had before.
Was he a fun person to be with?
Yeah, he was great. He was total loony.
I've got a question here. Is there a characteristic about your dad that you'd like to see develop in yourself?
Well, there is one that's already started showing signs of, which is total lunacy. You know, I just like having a lot of fun and generally being crazy.
Did he ever take you aside and give you any lessons in playing guitar or drums or singing or writing?
Well, there's only a few times where we sat down together and we, you know, I played him the stuff that I knew, and he said, well, here's a few more to learn, you know, and we just sat down and played together for a couple of hours.
It's not easy being the son of a Beatle, is it?
Well, I wouldn't know any otherwise, you know, I wouldn't. But it doesn't seem that bad so far. You know.
Do you find that people constantly ask you about it?
Yeah, it's always, you know, wherever you go, there's always the reaction that someone comes up to you and says, oh, I used to know your father, so-and-so, and gets pretty tiring after a while.
It seems to me that that Yoko and your dad really had something special going. Would you agree with that?
Totally, yeah. They were totally together and in tune with whatever they did, you know, whether it be business or outings or whatever, you know.
They were inseparable?
Yeah, yeah.
And was that for the entire period of their relationship?
Most of the time, except for that year split, or I don't know how long it was, 6 months or a year, early 70s. But that was the only time they separated, really. Why
do you think your dad was so public about his feelings, you know, like Peace, the Beatle years? He was often sort of brutally honest.
Yeah.
Was that just his nature, or...?
Yeah, it was his nature completely. He'd let all his feelings out, you know. That's how he felt about everything, so why not tell everybody? Because nobody else seemed to want to try and, you know, explain what was going on, and he did his best to let it all out. It's hard to explain.
One of the songs that he wrote, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, was supposedly written about a picture that you had drawn.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Have you got that picture?
No, I lost that years ago.
Do you remember the occasion?
Yes, it was when I was about 4 or 5, came home from school with a painting that I'd done that day, and came through the front door, and Dad sort of came and sat down by me, and he said, oh, what's that? You know, I said, oh, it's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And he said, who's Lucy? And I said, oh, it's a sort of girlfriend at school. You know, he said, oh, great. But he didn't mention anything about writing a song about it or anything.
When did you find out that your dad had been shot?
About 7 hours after. I came downstairs in the morning, and all the blinds were closed, and Mum was in London, and there was a lot of letters on the sideboard for me, and I was sort of, oh, what's all this, you know? And my stepdad came through, and I said, what's going on? So I went to pick up the letters, and he said, no, leave them there, come in here, I want a word with you. And I sat down, and I knew there was something wrong, and I didn't know what. And he said, prepare yourself, and I said, well, what could have happened? And he said, your father's been shot dead. And it was total blank. I said, are you sure he's dead? He said, yes, you know, and I just broke down. I couldn't do anything, yeah. But I pulled myself together pretty quick, because only the fact that there were so many other people who were a lot closer to him than I was, really, on a friendship basis, and knew him a lot longer than I did. And I just felt, well, I've got to be strong, because if I'm living with my mother, and I know Yoko pretty well, if I'm strong, then I'll be able to cope with, you know, the distress that's going to hit them. Yeah.
You then flew to New York.
Yeah.
How was Yoko then?
Totally wiped out. Tears, everything. Well, I mean, it's expected, but I tried calming her down as much as I could, and we got to a stage where we were quite calm. But there was always something, you know, just any little thing that would just click, and she'd back into tears, and it was just hard work trying to keep calm all the time.
Well, there you have it. The days in the life of rock's greatest, John Lennon. And if he could hear me now, I certainly let him know that his contribution will never die. But for right now, we can all say, John Lennon remembered.
I love you. What about the night that cried? Because there wasn't any reason left to keep it all inside. Never understood a word, but you were always there with a smile. And if I say I really loved you and was glad you came along, and you were here today, for you were in my song.